Hello and welcome back to the Squash Bagel. Today's topic is actually a very interesting one. And I first of all would like to say that I am not pushing this out because I am a coach, but as you will, I guess, hear and see in the video, coaching is something that I'm quite passionate about, but also I feel has made a big difference to my game. I wish it's something that I had the opportunity to get when I was a younger player, when I was coming up, obviously, through the school system. Unfortunately for me, I only had a school coach. So I went to a school which had a school coach, which obviously would take care of all of the boys that will come to squash practice. It's only now, which is probably my 17th year of playing squash, that I've actually enlisted and used a individual and private coach. That's the thing. I want to just obviously vouch for the benefits of getting private coaching. And I think at the end of the day, I wish I did sooner. But basically, there are three situations which I have outlined and which I'm going to talk about in this video, which will help you determine if you need a coach or not. And before I get started, I just want to say, if you feel there's something I might have left out, or you'd like to add any sort of contribution to this discussion, please put it in the comments down below. The squash community is really small, so if we can benefit from discussions or even sort of suggestions and input from anyone else in the squash community, we and I will really appreciate it. Number one, when do you need a coach? Point number one is for people which are just starting out. So you've obviously watched people play squash and you really want to actually take this as a passion or a hobby or even become a professional. If you find yourself in that situation where you're really starting out, you're a beginner, I think that is probably a very good time to get a coach. The thing is that there's only one real specific reason why I would suggest it. Yes, at the end of the day, you do want to have fun. You want to maybe play for the sake of bragging rights or to just enjoy some time with friends and family. But the reason I say that a beginner will need a squash coach is just to make sure that they get solid fundamentals. Your solid fundamentals, obviously, with respect to shaping, how you prepare, how you make contact with the ball, how you follow through, that is really going to compound over time. And if it is a sport that you are passionate about and you see yourself playing a lot more often and you really want to get good at it, even when you're starting out, I would really suggest in spending some time and spending maybe a bit of money to get yourself a coach. So as I mentioned, in terms of solid fundamentals, these compound over time. And if you've learned obviously the wrong fundamentals or you're swinging the wrong way, as you keep on playing, it becomes very, very difficult for you to undo what it is that you learn. If you obviously learn the fundamentals in the wrong way, it becomes very, very difficult to undo what it is that you've learned, and you carry on playing squash in the same manner with the same bad habits, with the incorrect fundamentals, just because of a time aspect and the fact that you will repetitively do what it is that you've learned. You can obviously go either in a really good trajectory upwards, or you can find yourself plateauing because you've learned things in the incorrect manner, which will mean that later on in life you might have to undo what it is that you have learned. Solid fundamentals is the first thing that I look for as a coach, especially with the beginner intermediate players. When you get to advanced level, that's where you need to obviously get the help and advice of a more advanced coach. With the intermediate and beginner players and people which haven't really, I would say, reached a club level yet, you want to look at their fundamentals. That's the first thing I look at. So the first part of a coaching session will be just to assess the fundamentals, just do a baseline analysis of how is it that the person sort of swings. Do they have their preparation correct? Are they making contact with the ball at the right point? And how is their follow through? And I think at the end of the day, it's just really tough to undo bad habits. So that's one thing I do find when I coach older individuals. You'll see that they play that way for 10 years and they want to obviously start playing better, or they're climbing up the ranks through, a lot of practice, a lot of effort, but there's something obviously which is just holding them back and they've plateaued. What we try to do is go back to the fundamentals and try to teach them to do those things. And it is very difficult because in a session, what you'll find is that a player will do it correctly for the first 5 shots and afterwards their old habits come back. So it's really, really important as a beginner, if you are starting out, to really get a good solid foundation, which will help you in the future. And I think at the end of the day, you also want to avoid injuries. So you'll find a lot of players who play other ball sports or other sports might rely on other characteristics from other sports and bring it into squash, which does help them in the beginning. But as I mentioned, you will plateau and you might also develop injuries because you haven't been taught the right way to shape, the right way to approach the ball, the right way that you need to actually run towards the ball or fetch a ball. Even though that might be great in the beginning and you might seem like a natural, over time, they can obviously hamper your improvement. So that's situation number one. If you are starting squash, I would really suggest that you actually look at getting a coach. Point number two, when would you need to find yourself a coach? Well, if you've got ambitions of climbing up any sort of ranking, so this might be within your club, within your state or your province, or maybe in the country, you might find that you just need something and someone to help you with the next steps to take yourself to the next level. And what you'll see is that based on those ambitions, where it is that you want to improve, you will need to obviously look for a coach which has either reached those levels or has experience in coaching individuals at that level. This will be for anyone that wants to, and you'll probably hear about it in the PSA, where players sort of change coaches because, maybe their coach took them to a certain point, but they need someone with that experience to take them to the next level. I know that's a sore topic for some people, and we've seen it a lot in tennis, but in squash, it is also a reality at the end of the day that sometimes you will need to either change coaches or actually start getting a coach if it is that you have ambitions of getting a bit better and climbing up the ranks. That's obviously another situation, and maybe that comes a bit further down the line for some people, but it's never a bad time to actually get a coach, even if you've been playing for a couple of years, like myself, who's been playing for 17 years. It's not a bad thing to actually go and actually admit that I also need to get a coach which will help me with the technical points that I might be blind to. That's what I'm saying. It's not only for kids, and you do get a bit of hesitancy sometimes from people, or maybe there's sort of a boundary or just insecurity or fear to think that, well, I've been playing squash for 10 years, or I'm so old. Why do I need to go get a squash coach? Why do I need to put myself in a situation where someone needs to give me drills again? I would just say, try it out and you'll actually see the benefit of it. It is a huge mental hurdle to climb over, but once you do it, I think you'll be very glad that you did. Point number three, which is heavily tied to maybe point number two, but the third situation where you might need to obviously look at getting a coach is if you need to make technical changes. So technical changes can be a couple of things: the way you approach, the way you swing, the way you shape, small technical difficulties, change of grip, change of racket style. Normally this would happen in an off season or at the end of the season, where you felt and assessed yourself that maybe some things need to change, and with those changes, or you might need help with facilitating those changes and making those changes possible for your own game. Sometimes you might realize, hey, you know what, you've had bad fundamentals, or things have just changed in terms of your body size or your work situation, and you haven't been, I guess, or you've adapted bad habits and bad practices. Sometimes it's also good to get a good coach just to make sure that they can actually help you adapt to those changes. As I mentioned, maybe you might also get things like injuries. So injury to your lower body parts, or even your wrist or your upper arm, might prevent you from playing certain type of shots that you used to play. And now you need a coach which will help you actually get the same result, but in a different way. Sometimes you might find, and that's why I also really encourage people to film their games, or at least have someone recording their games or watching some things in their game. You might find that there are holes within your game, the way that it is that you're playing squash, and you might have a change of squash philosophy. And with that being said, you might find that you need a coach which either aligns that philosophy or can help you close those gaps in the game. And that's also another situation where you'll find that, yes, you might need to employ or look for the services of a coach. So yeah, this is the most important part probably. I do understand that getting a coach can be expensive. For a lot of people that would love to improve in squash and realize that they do need a coach but cannot afford it, there are alternatives. And that's what I actually want to end the video off with, is just speaking about the alternatives. If you do need squash coaching but you cannot afford, what is it that you can do? The alternatives at the end of the day is basically what I have mentioned: video and review. This would mean obviously the fact that you'd either get a phone or a camera and actually just record your games, and you will have to put in the time to analyze what it is that you've been doing, where it is that you can improve the zones or the areas that you find yourself in, where you play bad shots. And there are a lot of things that you can actually do for self-analysis. Probably another video that I should do in the future about how it is that you can analyze some of the points within your game after you've recorded it. But that is also an alternative if you cannot provide or afford a coach. But that is an alternative if you cannot afford a coach. The other alternatives is obviously things like YouTube. So there are a lot of other YouTube channels which are very well kitted out and dedicated towards, I guess, squash coaching and self-taught improvement. Just the channels that pop up at the top of my head is Coach Philip. I'll put links at the bottom of the description to those other channels as well. There's The Pursuit of Squash, and I think probably the most famous within the squash community is also thesquashbagel.com. Thesquashbagel.com obviously does come at a bit of an expense. They do have their introductory videos on YouTube, but in order to get the full package and the full video, you will need to obviously subscribe to Squash Skills and actually get access to their material. As I mentioned, the thing is that those are alternatives, but they will help to a certain extent. I think just to summarize this video, where it is that a coach really helps is just having that bird's eye view. Coaches at the end of the day are a lot more experienced with respect to coaching, what it is that they need to look for, and they are separated and are removed from the situation that you are in. And you might find that you have obviously blind spots, things that you're not even aware of, and it's small, minor details that they can obviously tune and tweak. We also have to also understand ourselves that we are limited to what it is that we know. And that's where a coach really comes with a, sort of an open view and sees you and every other component and sees how it is that there's a chain reaction of what it is that you're doing. And the coach's goal is basically to see what the inputs are and see what the outputs are and actually make changes and differences based on that. The coach's whole goal is to actually, the point of a coach is that he or she is supposed to look at you holistically and actually make sure that everything's in balance and actually see where it is that you can make the improvements, even if you cannot see them yourself. And I think when you're in a situation where you have to decide whether you're willing to pay for a coach and are capable of doing it, and you really want to actually think about the benefit to cost ratio or if it's really worth it, I think you just need to ask yourself a simple question. Are you willing to put the time and effort into making sure your game has improved? Do you have that time to actually go back and review your matches? Do you have that time to actually, remove yourself from the situation and be independent of what it is that you feel and know that someone else can? Are you able and willing to push yourself a bit more than what you are capable of doing? And that's what I'm saying, that the coach, just their role and the things that they facilitate really ensure that you are pushing past those plateaus, pushing past your limits, pushing past what you think that you are limited to. And that's what we really need coaches for at the end of the day. They are an invaluable resource for those who can obviously afford it. As I mentioned, there are also alternatives. That's why I'm saying that it's only now that I have obviously used a coach, but it is well worth it. I'm really happy with the jump that I took to actually be accepting of the fact that I need coaching. And I think the other question is that if you aren't really sure of what exactly would happen in a coaching session, I'm going to link a video up here just to sort of show in a sort of bird's eye view, or just as a glimpse from an outsider what is actually entailed in a coaching session. Emma found obviously a few clips of me training with Tyrone just before the Growth Point tournament. Put some nice music on there. We've sort of tried to make it a squash motivational video, something that's hopefully quite cool. I don't think there are a lot of those out there on YouTube, but yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not really detailed. It's not really explained. It's just something that you can watch and enjoy. And maybe you'll see some elements of what happens within a session. It will obviously differ and vary amongst different coaches in different regions and ages, and there's so many factors to determine what it is a coaching session will be like. And the best thing I can say is find out from your club or your local squash courts and find out who the coaches are, what it is that they can provide, what their experience is. Let them also provide you sort of guidance with respect to who would be a good coach based on the ambitions that you do have. It is something that at least coaches should also know, that there is a limit to what they can teach a person, and they will refer them on to another coach based on those ambitions. I hope and I pray that obviously you don't get coaches which are selfish, which want to keep as many people as they can without actually giving benefit. Find yourself a good coach if you can. If you are in the situation that you can actually get coaching, I would really recommend it. That's about it. I hope you enjoyed that video. As I said, link will be up there, and click on that and you can actually maybe see what it's like to actually get coached. This will just be a video of me being coached by Tyrone. That's about it for tonight. Take care. Cheers.